Oh, guys, good, you hear? I am so excited. Guess what? I hope this isn't about your podcast again. Why, did you finally listen to it?
Da-da-da-da. 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 The Groomer Next Door production. You're listening to BYOTP Radio. Coming up next, the Groomer Next Door. The Groomer Next Door podcast.
Dun, 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 dun.
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to another fun-filled episode of The Groomer Next Door. I'm your host, Chris Green, and joining me in just a few minutes is MK Clinton. She is an author, a blogger, and an animal lover. Little side note, how MK Clinton and I were able to get in touch with each other is we both really are absolutely in love with Dr. Harvey's. And a conversation started, and I found out that she's written these great books, and I said, oh my gosh, we've got to talk. And the rest is history. So, this is episode 185. We're only 15 away from that elusive 200. And this week's Fact of the Week. In Egypt, a person bitten by a rabid dog was encouraged to eat the roasted liver of the dog infected with rabies to avoid contracting the disease. The tooth of a dog infected with rabies would also be put in band tied to the arm of the person bitten. The menstrual blood of a female dog was used for hair removal, while dog genitals were used for preventing the whitening of hair. Very strange. I do not understand some of these old facts of what happened in previous times. I am so glad to be living in this day and age. I'm pretty sure we all can agree to that. Science has come so far, and I'm so glad about that. I'm sure you guys all are too. The day and age with cell phones and iPads and, modern technology. Well, I guess parts of the world are still a little bit like that, but at least in our part of the world where you're listening to this podcast, it is actually a little bit more techno age, and that is amazing. Well, with all that said, here we are joined by the great MK Clinton.
Oh, hello. Hold on a sec. Dad, we have a guest on the podcast.
This week we are so lucky. We are joined by an author, a blogger, a passionate nutritional guru, I think would be a good way of putting that, and somebody who just is doing a lot of fun things. And I think I said blogger. I don't know if I said that out loud because I threw myself off, but we are so lucky to be joined by MK Clinton. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Well, let's always start with the best part. And this is the part that I love the most, especially when I get to talk to people, is I want to know your origin story. Where did it all start, and what actually brought you to where you are today?
Well, I was working at a local high school in the library, and I love reading. I was reading a book every other day. And my husband kept saying, you read so much, you should try writing. And I was like, I don't know. And he says, no, I know you can do it. Because I love to write speeches, and I'd write newspaper articles for the school. And I was a president of the PTA, so there has been a female President Clinton. I've been the president 4 times. But I decided that I would just take the plunge, and I turned in my resignation, and I started writing my first book. It's called The Returns, and I self-published that, and I worked on the second book, and everyone kept telling me, you need a platform, a blogging platform for your book. So I started out with a blog, just giving my opinion on books and writing and that sort of stuff. And then I'd always had something about pet care. And then I discovered Blog Pause and the world of pet blogging. And so I literally just went to the dogs and changed the title of my blog to Barking from the Bayou. And now I publish a new blog 5 days a week. And that's where it all started.
It's funny when you think about it. You know, for one, that's difficult to come up with content 5 days a week. I mean, I've told a couple people who are bloggers the same thing. It is an enormous responsibility that, honestly, I give you credit because it's so hard to do it.
Well, thanks. I was doing 7 days a week, and I decided that, 5 would be plenty. So we do, on Mondays, we do a good news report. The dogs, I have a Basset Hound named Bentley and a West Highland Terrier named Pierre, and they share good news reports. We scour the internet to find happy stories, because I figure there's enough bad out there that, give everybody a break. They can come and laugh and see some good stuff. And then we have my son has a Labrador retriever, and we made her Paisley the Weather Lab, so she does the weather forecast every week. And then the rest of the week we do product reviews and tips for pet parents to, just kind of give everybody some help to be the best pet parent they can be.
And it is hard. There's a lot of products out there, and it's kind of overwhelming at times. I hear it from people. They're like, well, there's always something new coming out, and how is this supposed to be better than that? And it almost becomes a challenge for, pet parents on the go. So it
is. It can be overwhelming. I mean, you can walk into any pet store and you're just inundated with products and foods and treats and grain-free, and, it can be overwhelming. So that's where I try to help narrow down, this is, in my opinion, what works for my dogs. And hopefully people can take from that.
And that's always the hope. And it's funny, you're talking about the evolution of the blog. It's so funny when you set out to do something creatively. And we had talked about this before we even started. You create something and you're putting it out there in a digital format for everybody. And you're really exposing yourself to criticism. And you're hoping that you're going to touch somebody in the right way. And yet some days, and I'm sure you go through it, some days, without even trying, you just hit that one person where they're just, anything you say, anything you've done, they're like, you're an idiot. And they have to express that, and you don't know why.
Right. It's like they would not like me to come to their job and criticize them. Mm-hmm. No one likes criticism. Nope. But, it's just the world we live in. There's people that just like to be miserable, and they like to spread that misery to everyone possible. Sometimes you're that person.
Now, here's something I do all the time. Now, being in this creative format that we're in, there's always this, is this a good idea? Bounce off. Now, I use my wife, which I think I've wore all the creativity off of her. I think she's just completely numb to it at this point. Do you go to your husband and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do? Or is he exactly where my wife is and saying, go ask somebody else?
No, I'm very lucky that he's retired, so we're here together with the two dogs all day. So he bounces ideas off of me, and I bounce ideas off of him, and he takes all of my pictures for the blog, and he does a phenomenal job with photoshopping. So my dogs can drive boats, they can water ski, they can get on rocket ships, they can do just about anything imaginable. And so we're a pretty good team with that. His name is not on the blog. He likes to stay in the background, but he's a very big part of it. He proofreads everything because that's something that I find really difficult, and especially when I was writing my books, you don't see mistakes. Your eyes it's like when you skip over, somebody tells you to read how many eyes are in a certain sentence, and people say 4 and people say 7 when there's really 15, because our brains just skip over words like if and it, and so he's my spell check.
And I literally just had an ADD moment. Well, it's always funny. Interesting things always happen while I'm recording, so that's why I was like, oh, interesting. Now, the whole thing, how this whole conversation started was after I got done with my Dr. Harvey's episode. I had posted it, and you saw it, and you had raved about Dr. Harvey's, and I thought, hey, this is great. I get to have a conversation with somebody and continue the conversation. Now, you're big on nutrition, as we have already been able to kind of establish here. And you're a huge Dr. Harvey's fan. So please explain your nutritional desire and where you take it, and how you got into the Dr. Harvey's experience, and how you just said, you know what, I'm going to believe in this.
Well, I am, and I've been an ambassador for Dr. Harvey's for almost 3 years now. I met them, actually, I contacted them when I was looking for something to change the way I was feeding my dogs kibble. And my basset hounds, they're not the most active of dogs anyway. And we'd take them walking, and I had a lady stop one day and stop her car and say, your dog's belly's rubbing the ground. Oh my gosh. Took offense to it, but the reality of it was he was not healthy. He was way overweight. So I contacted Wendy from Dr. Harvey's, and I just asked her, what can I do? And she sent me some samples of their food, and it's a pre-mix where you boil the water and pre-mix the vegetables, and it's got fruit and stuff in it, and you add your own protein and your own oils. So they're getting great food. And Bentley lost 10 pounds, and now he's the perfect size. And he's been on the food for 3 years now, and I can't imagine. He's just so healthy. And my Westie is super healthy. He's never had a problem in his life, but it's the nutrition. What goes in is what makes the dog. It just makes the dog healthy or unhealthy. If you feed them junk food, they're not going to be really healthy and happy dogs.
They won't. And it's funny. A lot of my side episodes, they don't always focus on nutrition, because we do a lot of episodes on nutrition, but I like to be able to talk to people that aren't connected to your Dr. Harvey's, your Primal, your Rad Cats, or your Darwins. I want to talk to people that are, just the regular everyday consumers. Because it's like, right. At the end, you can look at an episode and go, well, it's going to be biased towards that company. But what made it interesting to have this conversation was, okay, well, you're not connected to them. You just support the product. And that was an interesting concept. It's like, we can continue a conversation that was done in another episode, and we have so much to go over, but it was so interesting just to see that message come up. I was like, wow, okay, this is cool. I like it. And that's why I always encourage people, and I'm sure you do the same thing. Comment. Have that conversation with me. I want to have that conversation. This is why this is out there in digital world for everybody to consume.
That's right. And I try to, I understand a lot of people less expensive dog food, and when they tell me, my dog has diarrhea all the time, or my dog, his hair's coming out, he's lethargic, and I tell them, it's what you're feeding them. Mm-hmm. You have to feed them good quality food, and all they need to do is not go to the drive-through windows several times a month, and they can afford to feed their dog. You know, they're a responsibility.
There.
You don't feed your kids junk food all the time, hopefully.
Nope.
And you shouldn't feed your dogs junk food or your cats junk food because they're going to be fat and lazy, and you're going to not have them as long as you want to have them.
Right. Well, it's you know, as you said that, what has drawn me completely off topic is, and I'm going to be posted today, of course, by the time this is out there. One thing that will be is this post will be out. There's this cat story that I'm going to be posting, and the cat just jumped into the area right where I'm at and completely threw me off. So you may hear a cat meowing. It's a very strange story, but it's a sweet story. So I thought I'd actually just kind of throw it. If you just heard this loud meow come through the actual microphone, it was because the cat's meowing at me and sitting right next to me now. Now,
I'm hearing about good food. So.
Right. Well, she's, you know, it's an interesting story. Kind of a quick rundown. This cat was lethargic. We got a phone call. I was off at a board meeting for youth sports here in town, and my wife and daughter were driving back from the shop. They saw this cat. They actually were notified by a friend of ours. They found the cat. It was lethargic, possibly dehydrated because it was super hot at the time. She picked up the cat, brought it back to the house, which we do rescue. We rescue, we foster, we find forever homes for dogs and cats throughout the area. And the cat went into the kitty condo, pretty much, which is one of our side rooms. It also shares as our laundry room, and it's a multi-purpose. And she, you know, they have a bed, a litter box, you know, water, food. She didn't eat for a couple days, and for some reason, she just kind of finally perked up the day that we were going to take her to a vet. Luckily, I have a friend who has been on the podcast who I was talking to him, going, hey, what's going on? What should we do? He came up with the same pretty much diagnosis just by thought, you know, by talking without examining, because he's in St. Louis. And it was like, well, we're going to have to take her to the vet. And she picked up that day that we were going to take her to the vet, and she's been great. But she doesn't want to be an indoor cat. And she definitely doesn't play well with others. And so she became an outdoor cat because she was having this meow that had this almost kind of a sad meow, like, why are you doing this to me? And I could pick up on it. So I let her out. I of course rely on all the people that have been on the podcast. There's a lot of them that I still talk to, and I ask a lot of questions. And I put her out one night. A friend of mine's like, no, you should really do it in the daytime. I've never put a cat outside, but I knew that's where she wanted to go. She came back the next day, and now every morning when it's time to go to work, I put her outside, or my wife puts her outside, and she literally stays right at the house. I live in a little residential area. Good. It's adorable, and the photo, you know, again, you'll see it once I post, and everybody has seen it probably by now because this is going up in the future. But she likes to sleep in the planter right by my daughter's window, and she stays there all day. It's adorable, and so she just jumped in here and wanted to spend the time while I'm recording the podcast. So it's an interesting story. I mean, this is probably one of the more bizarre ones, but every day it's like when you go to work, she wants to leave. She doesn't want to be in the kitty condo, and most of our cats, actually 99.9 now, have always wanted to be in the kitty condo. It's nice in there, it's secluded, it's private, and they hate when we move them. When they graduate up, because a lot of times they're kittens, or they're special needs, once they graduate out, they hate leaving. This one, first one who's ever said, I want out right now.
Maybe she's a guard kitty.
Apparently.
Be out there and protect the house and make sure nobody else moves in.
It's possible. I mean, I've never seen a cat do this. I mean, for the first maybe week, she would take off and go, but she'd always be back around this time. Now she never leaves the area. She never leaves the front yard or backyard. I don't know.
Well, that's safest for her.
Yeah. Yeah, apparently it is, and I love it. So I've completely derailed us. I do apologize, but like I said, I told you shiny red ball, and I go right off to another direction. So to bring us back on track, now I had told you my little story about still boxing before, and like I always say, I love to hear other people's. It's almost in a sense. Therapeutic for me, because then I feel like I'm not so crazy, and always like to try to convince people that maybe the big box or big pet food companies at the big box stores is not the way to go. So
Right.
I always ask, what is your soapbox story? And, is it as, crazy as mine, or are you just one of those subtle ones that are like, well, people are people?
Well, I try, mainly I answer people's questions when they say, like I said, my dog constantly has loose stools, my dog throws up, my dog refuses to eat the food that he's been eating every day for the past 5 years. Well, would you eat the same food every day for 5 years? No. They want some variety. Things have changed. The way people understand the dogs and their cats has changed so much over the past few years. And now I saw the other day that people are buying their houses and their cars for their animals. People aren't having as many children, or they would rather have their pets. And so the way that we treat our animals has changed in the last 20 years. I know growing up, people didn't have, for me, in the South, most dogs didn't live in the house. They lived in the yard. People that had their dogs in their house, you were just like, wow, that's different. And now there's very few dogs in the backyard. Most people's dogs live in their house. Their cats live in their house. So you have to, we know they crave companionship, and they crave good food, and they, you have to take them to the vet, not just once a year for their shots, but, wellness checkups when they get older, and just the entire way we treat our animals has progressed, and we're better for it. Our pets are definitely better for it. And there's a million kinds of dog food to choose from, and the cost spectrum goes from to really expensive.
Right.
So I just try to tell people that you want your dogs and cats around for as long as possible, and you have to feed them good food, and you have to take care of them. So if they ask me, I can tell them. I always refer them to Dr. Harvey, because I can see how it works on my dog. And they're so healthy. I mean, they went from, like I said, my Basset Hound lost 10 pounds from not eating junk food. So it makes a huge difference. And another thing I like, and I'm not trying to just promote Dr. Harvey's, although I am, but you can call and talk to Dr. Harvey. I had a problem with my Basset Hound itching, and I was like, he's scratching, I don't know what to do. And, I called the number, and Dr. Harvey answered the phone. I was like, wow, what now? And so he just told me, add a little more oil for a while. So I was adding more, I added more of his coconut oil or whatever, fish oil, whatever kind of oil I was adding into his food that day. I just add a little more, and it made a difference.
And see, that's what's so interesting about, just the Dr. Harvey experience that I even had, is to find out how it's a family operation, how they really kept it within. And I enjoyed that part alone, knowing that it's not like, okay, well, we've been doing this for 3 decades, we should stop at 2 decades and just kind of take our foot off the gas. No, they're there every day working it and making sure everything stays to their quality. And I did everything. That was awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool, and they're the nicest people. Then they have a Basset Hound, so
I don't even think that came up in the interview, which is kind of weird. I don't think I even asked that question because we were so immersed in conversation that I didn't even think, hey, what kind of dog do you have? I never even asked that.
I know they have a wonderful girl basset.
Well, it's funny because, I'm lucky enough to see all types of dogs because of our job, and one of our good friends, Marilyn, she has a basset hound that I just absolutely love. And so when I saw your book, I was like, it reminded me of Bam. It just automatically, I was like, oh. So I was, it was almost kind of like putting all the pieces together. I saw your dog and I saw your book, and we had a little bit of conversation before, and I was like, well, this is going to be fun.
Well, that is actually Bentley on the front of my book.
Right. And her dog's named
and
Bam.
Pierre is on the second book, The Showstoppers, my Westie. So they think they're pretty famous.
Well, wait, all dogs and cats think that they're famous with the way that they're treated. I mean, at our house, if they come outside and I'm recording, they have to come up to the car. I have the cat that's right there now on the hood, not in the car, but actually on the hood of the car. I think our animals, whether they're ours or just our fosters, are just overly well taken care of. Sometimes I think that they and I've said this before in different episodes, I think they actually make a point to not get adopted when we're at events. I've seen them do all kinds of things. I'm like, they don't do this in real life. Well, they sure do right now.
You don't want me.
No. Hey, why don't you take that one over there? He seems, look at him look at himself, thinking he's all great. You want to adopt that one.
That's great. I've not fostered. My Westie was actually my daughter's dog, and she moved when she got married. She moved from Louisiana to Alaska, and unfortunately, we had just lost our golden retriever, and my Bentley was very depressed, and she brought the Westie over, and he just brought so much joy back into Bentley's life, and they played and ran around the backyard, and it was like he had a best friend again. And so we've been fortunate that she was understanding and said, well, he can stay here with y'all. So that's how he came to be.
And they say that me going from Los Angeles to Missouri was a culture shock. That is definitely
right. Yes, and that's what I thought. I said, he wouldn't like being up there in Alaska. Anyway, he's a southern dog.
Now, I want to go into the books, and when you say Southern Dog, I'm automatically drawn back to our conversation before we recorded about how they actually have a Southern accent and not a intellectually superior kind of accent, which is just, that made me laugh so much. I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what my dogs sound like in my head.
It's so funny because once you start writing, from my own personal experience, when I started writing, they just talk to you at night, especially at night. And I would keep my notepad by my bed because I'd be almost asleep, and one of the dogs would say something, or a cat would say something. And the book, it's not a story of my dogs and cats, although all of the characters are based on my dogs and cats, because I know their personalities.
Right.
So I have Bentley starts the book off, and he was a detective. My dog actually has a number 7 on his side, and so in the book he was a detective with a badge number 7, and he dies and goes to heaven, and they're telling him he's there too soon. And they send him to the returns department, and the angels there tell him they're going to put him in a body to finish his life's work. And he wakes up in New Orleans, and he's a basset hound, and he's not very happy about it.
could have been worse.
So,
he could have been, he could have been my Chihuahua, which,
Well, and it's funny you say that, because there is a Chihuahua in the book that used to be a lightweight, a featherweight boxer, and he comes back as a Chihuahua with a small man syndrome. He talks a tough game, and he's one of the returns, and the other is my golden retriever, and then Pierre is a fashion designer that came back as a Foo Wessie is with, and then the cat. One of the cats was my Tatty cat, and then I have a Manx, a black Manx that is in the story. But I know all their personalities, so it was easy for me to make them characters. I know how they act, and I know what. Don't you make your animals talk, or is it just me?
I do. I don't have a voice for them. Like, I know their personality, so I can completely relate. Every one of them have a special personality. Our Akita is this just kind of goofball, in a sense. Not the typical Akita. So I would always think of her as just the do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Right.
And it's like, I've never really put the voice to them. I've done ridiculous voices for my daughter with all of our animals, but I never really, married it to any of the dogs or cats. But I get
it's
that.
A lot of fun. You should try it. We used to tell the kids, that the dogs would, so-and-so was driving the car last night, or, took the boat out, or, so we've always made stories to entertain our kids with our pets. And so this was just kind of a natural progression, and it was surprising how easy it was to write the books. Is they just kind of took over. Like I said, they would wake me up at night talking in my head, and I'd be like, I've really got to sleep, you guys. Let me sleep.
Now, with the first book, now you self-published it. Now, with the second one, were you able to actually get a publishing deal, or did you have to self-publish?
No, I self-published both of them.
Interesting.
And I'd love to. If any publishers are out there that would like to publish my book, let me know. But I decided I had a bunch of people read to me. I had an editor, and I had a girl do my design work on the cover. And I just went for it. Just took that flying leap of faith, and it paid off. They've been really successful books, and then I've got a couple of quotes from them that are pretty well known. So I've been really lucky.
So now both your books, they take place in New Orleans. Now what was your desire to actually place them in New Orleans? Was there something specific, or was it just familiarity?
Well, if you tell somebody you're from Louisiana, and I wanted to write about what I know, and I know Louisiana, and people automatically associate New Orleans with Louisiana, so I thought that would be the best place to put them. And then in the second book, they actually start in Louisiana, but they go to a dog show in New York City, which is where my mother and my brother live. So I'm familiar with that area also. But I just wanted to write where there's so much fun in New Orleans. The first book takes place during Mardi Gras, so there's a whole story just with Mardi Gras.
Now, I unfortunately have only read little pieces of each book, but now you don't have, and maybe this is a stereotype, so I do apologize if it's going to be a stereotype, but no alligators are part of the storyline, are there?
There are no alligators. Maybe there should be in the third book. Maybe there should be an alligator.
I know it's a stereotype, and again, some of the best creativity comes with stereotype, and I get that. But it's like, I don't mean it by anything more. But it's like, I think Louisiana, and I think of Florida, and the two things that coexist in both places is alligators. So,
well, there are a lot of alligators here, and there is a scene. There's a part in the first book where the dogs can do everything that humans can do, except they're dogs, and so they drive a little bitty car, and they're driving a little car, and they think they see an alligator on the road, but that's really they eat a lot of food, I did have somebody who was talking about critics. I had somebody write a review and say that they were very upset that I let the dogs eat chocolate. Well, the dogs, it says in the book that they have the stomach of a human. They just are in the dog's body. So they eat pizza, Bentley eats ho-hos, and they eat turducken for Thanksgiving, and their guardian angel is a horrible cook, and so the Tucker, who's the golden retriever, has some hilarious prayers about their food. So, but none of my dogs actually eat junk food. But in the book, it's New Orleans. They eat Cajun fish. They're very, very funny.
it's a fun story. I've never understood why people have to take everything and make it literal.
Well, that's what I wanted to say. Well, they're humans that came back as dogs. Where do you want the realism to be? It's pretty much a pretend story. They drive, and Pierre the Westie can sew, and he makes costumes for them for Mardi Gras. So it's really kind of make believe.
See, I just see the crocodile as Dr. Crocs, kind of think of the shoes Crocs, and
right.
And I can totally see it actually playing out, and that's why I was like, well, I mean, I'm one of those people. A lot of people that have been on when we're not recording, we'll talk about different things, and I'll say, well, have you thought about this? I'm creative, obviously, and I'm always willing to have that little creative conversation. Again, my wife is bored of it. She's tired of me talking about creative. Would you stop showing me the same circle of whatever? I get it. And and so it's fun to actually bounce off of people, especially creative people. And if people are going to, again, back to the whole, people are going to complain and have something negative to say because they are not creative. They have no imagination. And
right. You can't take life so seriously. It's not meant to be serious. You're supposed to enjoy your life and laugh. And if you don't, you're doing something wrong. So that's why my book is strictly to make people laugh and feel good. It's an adventure, and they solve some mysteries, and it's fun. But the main thing I want people to do is to feel good, just escape from the harsh realities of the world for a little bit every day while they read. Same way with my blog. It's meant to make you feel better than when you got there.
Exactly.
I want you to leave happy.
Now, you finished The Return. What brought you to actually write a second, The Return 2, Showstoppers?
Well, The Returns, when it ended with a cliffhanger, which was a dog napping case. And so they had to come back and solve the dog napping case. So that's where the second book came in. And the third book, which I started before I started the blog, which is why it's not been finished, is there's somebody threatening to blow up parts of New Orleans. So that's where they're at now. They're trying to catch a bomber, so to speak. But I haven't finished it. I keep saying I'm going to stop blogging for a while and get back to writing it, but So far, it's about halfway done. So we'll see how long it takes me to finish it, hopefully, and not too much longer, because I have people writing me all the time saying, we're ready for the third book. We're ready to see what happens. We missed the game, so they've gotten attached to my characters, and they want to know what they're doing. So I really should get back and let them get back to crime fighting and eating junk food and celebrating life.
Well, it's funny, and I listen to everybody who has really cool books, and they're putting it out there. Is the thing is that those characters may not live on in everybody's mind, but in the author's mind, they do. Those dogs are alive and well, and they're experiencing life through your imagination on a daily basis. And yet, I always look at people like you, and I think, it's such a creative juice that you're able to have and share moments with people. And
right.
And they're demanding, I want more, I don't know what's going on. It's kind of like that weird family member that only comes over for maybe Thanksgiving and you don't see them for the rest of the year. You want to know what's going on with them, but maybe they're just not on Facebook. That's kind of what the story is, and I can relate, where you want to know more, and the audience are drawn in, and of course, people are busy. It's hard to write a book. So you have that, well, I know I got to get it done. You're living with them in your imagination, and everybody's just like, I need them now. So,
and I have pages of notes where they say stuff, or I have an idea that they can do this or do that, or I have a quote I think that one of them should say, and I've got notes everywhere. So.
And
there will definitely be a third book.
I would think that you would, at some point, and I mean, I'm going to go way out, and I always do this. I always take an assumption, and I probably shouldn't, but I would bet you by the time you finish book 3, you will already have content for book 4 if you want to go down that direction.
Well, my original thought was to write 7 books in the series for Bentley's number 7.
Makes sense.
And that may still happen. We've since had a granddaughter, and I want to write books. And my books they're from ages 12 to 112. There's not sex scenes in them. There's no bad, and you want a challenge. Write a book and not use any bad words.
I do a podcast and I don't use any bad words.
But I wanted something that my nieces and nephews and my granddaughter can read and be proud of, right. And my mother could read and be proud of, and hopefully I wouldn't offend anybody in between.
And see, that's what's cool about it, is that the beginning of in a sense, the origin of your books is you had your actual readers picked out. You knew where you wanted to start. You didn't want to do a tween type thing. I mean, I honestly was looking through it and I'm going, seriously, I have an almost 9-year-old who could handle it. I mean, there's definitely much worse things that she watches.
Oh, yes. There's nothing bad. There's not anything that I wouldn't let. I mean, if you're 9 years old and you can read and it's not, it's not Shakespeare. So I think that if they're a good reader, a 9-year-old could read it and enjoy it. I've had people. I had one lady tell me, write to me, which is really cool to have your readers write you and love your characters. But I had one lady, her husband had died, and she felt that letting her kids read it gave them hope that their dad lived on, which I thought was kind of bizarre, but still in a nice way.
Agreed.
I had an older lady tell me that reading my book helped her laugh through her mastectomy when she had breast cancer, which was, heartwarming. That's what you want to do, to take people away from their problems. So it's a wide spectrum of people that can read the book and enjoy it. Then that's a success for me.
And what's great is that through Amazon, you have it in 2 platforms. You have it on Kindle, and you have it in paperback. So people can actually, use their Kindle, because a lot of people are, and this goes back to a conversation we had before we even started, with technology. I still like the feel of a book. I don't really like the digital. I don't even like the digital on my music. I still want to touch something. And I'm one of those people. I'm like, I want to touch the actual CD case. I want to touch a book. I want to feel it. I don't want to only have a digital. But in this day and age, it's probably helps with clutter, and I know that for a fact.
That's
CD
true. But we always want. There's always people that want to hold a book.
Yeah.
And thank God, because that keeps our libraries open.
Yeah.
And as long as there's people that want to touch the book, then that's a good thing. Yeah. I've had a lot of paperback and hardback books. I do have a Kindle also, because otherwise I'd have to have a library. Mm-hmm. So many books.
Well, it's kind of funny. I look back and I go, not that long ago, even when I was a kid, our Google was Encyclopedia Britannica. I mean, I remember that was if you had the entire collection, you were pretty much, you would be considered to be rich. Because they weren't not cheap. I mean, and it's like now your phone has more than the Encyclopedia Britannica or any other kind of device. I mean, it's just so bizarre.
And they're tiny.
Yeah, and they are tiny. I know. I know. But they're the most.
Your back on the MLM section book on the encyclopedia.
It's so unique, and I love it. And it's like we talked. I mean, it was about 2008. That's when the real curve, where yes, newspapers were kind of going away, unfortunately, previously, but that's when we really started to see the incline. I mean, 2010 or 11, the iPad comes out, the Kindle comes out, our phones are smartphones. I mean, it became almost an avalanche of technology, and I always commend everybody for jumping on board and making sure that they were right there. And, here you've got 2 books, a third on the way. You have a blog. I mean, you are in that digital, you're in more of a digital era than I am. And I'm always impressed by that.
And that's crazy, isn't it? Because I used to work for the telephone company. I was a directory assistance operator, the 411. Uh-huh. And when I started, right out of high school, we had huge telephone books. Uh-huh. And you looked up, if somebody called for John Smith, you looked up John Smith in a giant phone book. And before I'd left, it had gone to computers. Mm-hmm. And it was crazy. I mean, we had the first fax machine in the city at our phone store, and now everything is just, I'm sure they do everything on a keyboard that we did and that was in the 80s when I quit working there, and it was, everything had gone from huge books to a computer, which I'm sure the computers are smaller now than they were back then, but it all of a sudden went from computers only being at the IBM company to being in people's homes. Come on, can you think of people who actually know what a rotary phone looks like or have ever used one? Oh my gosh, I know. We had my niece and nephew came over. I have one of those old heavy black, kind of rotary phones that takes a few minutes to dial. And they were just amazed by it. They'd never seen such a creature. And I think that's so funny.
It's like even my phone itself, there is 0 buttons. I mean, yes, the on button and the volume button, which are standard on every phone, but my screen, there is 0 buttons on this phone. And my daughter looks at it and she goes, it doesn't have that button on it. And I was like, yeah, they took it off of this model. And she goes, that's weird. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking to myself, you think that's weird? You try a rotary phone now. When you call
we used to be connected to a cord on the wall.
Right? We had no mobility. I mean, it's like, I even think back, I go, can you imagine doing a radio show just anywhere and then putting it online for anybody to listen to? I mean, all this is so bizarre even to me, and I'm up to date with it, and I'm still going, this is all very weird.
It is. It amazes me. My husband and I have been married for over 35 years, and we were discussing not long ago the changes since, in the last 35 years, that it's stunning. I mean, it's, it just makes your head spin to think what it's going to be like in the 35 more years. What will our kids think? They're going to complain, well, we had digital phones, and we used to have to charge our phones every night.
Well, I mean, I've asked my mom. I'm like, how did you manage? I mean, when you would go someplace and you had to wait, whether it's a restaurant or a doctor's appointment, you would read a magazine, but you'd have to manage your kid, and your kid's bouncing on the wall. Now you throw a tablet at him and go, okay, quiet. And you put Netflix on or something, and the kid is calm.
Right.
I'm always shocked. I mean, and I look and I go, 35 years, I look forward to actually seeing the progress, but then I'm kind of going, oh, maybe I'm not. It's a little frustrating.
I know. It's just, I can't imagine it changing as much as it has in the last 35, but it's going to.
Yep. Well, look at it going all the way. Let's go back full spectrum and full circle on this conversation, and let's look back 35 years on just dog food, and it has gone leaps and bounds. We had the big players. We didn't have raw diet was almost kind of we haven't really tested that idea out.
Yeah, I mean, you might give your dog some meat scraps that weren't cooked, or add an egg to their food, but it was, 2 or 3 kinds of kibble, and that's what they ate.
Yeah.
And not that not that it was bad, but we just didn't know better. When you know better, you do better.
I think that there was more, and this is observation more than anything else. I think that as I was growing up, people would just give, look back to the 80s, the 90s, even before that. I think people, I'm actually, 90s and below. I think people were more likely to give table scraps to their dogs than they were anything else. So the dogs would eat the kibble, but they had the protein, they had the vegetables, because they were eating off of their pet parents and the kids' plates.
Right. I mean, how many kids have snuck the broccoli to the dog?
And look at any good movie with a pet in it, with a dog especially, because obviously a cat's not going to eat broccoli, but look at any kind of movie. Look at the movie Beethoven. He puts the plate under the table, the dog eats the actual meat. That's exactly it. You go back and you go, see, that's why. People will say, well, dogs, lived so much better without all this raw and without all this stuff and da-da-da. No, it's because they were eating table scraps. Simple enough.
That's true. That's true. And I think now, and we had discussed this earlier, people in this, before the 1970s and the 80s, maybe that's when it started changing, but you had, you owned a dog. Yes. You owned a cat. They stayed outside. They ate maybe once a day. Twice a day was unheard of. You feed them, in the evenings. But they stayed outside, and they were your pets. Okay. And now they're family members. They live with us. They go on vacations with us. You take them to dog parks. There were no dog parks 30 years ago. Matter of fact, we just got our first dog park like a month ago here in our town. Wow. So, things have changed, and people are realizing that they're more than just, something to throw dog food down at once a day. Well, and you have to...
One thing that makes me happy is the property label is kind of dissolving. You're definitely seeing that property label where a dog is property. That's gone away from the West Coast. It's also gone away from the East Coast. I actually think you guys are more likely to not have that label in Louisiana, as it's kind of filtering its way towards the Midwest. And I think we won't see it for, I would say, 5 years. But it is definitely, if you see a dog outside during the freezing cold and the snow, you just had rain, a lot of rain in Louisiana last weekend. So you guys went, I think it was 10 inches I read. And
yeah, New Orleans was flooding.
Yep. And so, people's dogs, they typically would have just been outside. Now, no, that's like having a kid outside. Actually, I think it's more likely that your kid would be playing outside during that rain than that.
Exactly.
And I don't think that's a terrible thing.
My Basset Hound hates thunderstorms, so he wouldn't be outside at all.
Poor thing.
But yeah, it's and I think that it makes us a kinder, a kinder generation. Is that even though if you look online, people are angry and mean to one another, they're not as much to their animals. Nobody rubs their dog's nose in the accidents when they have them in the house anymore, or hopefully they don't. We've just learned that they're family. You treat them like family.
We treat them like,
and you feed them like family.
Right.
You don't, it's important.
I completely agree. Now, something we had talked about before, which confused me when I read about it. That's why I was like, I wanted to ask you about it. On Amazon, they had this, it says handmade frame quotation, and it has one of your quotes in it. And I was like, I was completely lost. And you were telling me about it. I was like, well, we got to talk about this during the actual podcast when we're recording this. I was like, what? So I'm just going to kind of leave that one over to you because it's it's absolutely amazing story. And then unfortunately, there's this profit that's being made off of your verbiage.
Well, that's true. And it's a strange, I have strange mixed feelings about it. I love the fact that the quote is, the world would be a nicer place if everyone had the ability to love as unconditionally as a dog. And it has struck a chord with dog lovers. And I think that's fabulous. I'm a quoteaholic. I've loved quotes since I was in elementary school, and the fact that I have a quote that is used so frequently and in conjunction with people's dogs, whether I find it on a lot of pictures where the dog has passed away, or they have a new dog, or it's used as a celebration of dogs' lives, and that makes me extraordinarily happy.
Now you're in
it's in the right. I think I'm between Gandhi and Einstein or something in the top 50 dog quotes. It's a huge honor, and with that, people have decided to share it on, like you said, on frames and on T-shirts, and I don't get any money for that, which I would love to get money from that. But it's out there in the world, and as long as it's making people happy, I'm happy with that. I'd like it to sell more books. The quote is actually, it's a cat. My cat says it, which I think is hilarious because a lot of people are sitting there, well, cats love unconditionally too, and I want to tell them, a cat is the one that said it in my book. I understand that cats love unconditionally also, but cat is the one speaking. So read the book, and then you'll get the quote.
What's funny is that they use it that a dog is actually saying the quote. So technically, if you really look at it, a dog is plagiarizing a cat.
Right. The cat is in the book. The cat is saying that the quote is from a cat in the book, but it's just really, my son called me one night and said, "Did you know that your quote is in the top 50 dog quotes?" So I was like, "What?" So I looked it up and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And then I realized it was in, the AKC has used it, and it's just countless. It's just used everywhere, and it's such an honor. It'll be around long after I'm gone, which is, I think, pretty awesome.
Well, when you make you've got multiple things that are gonna, pretty much last the test of time. You have your books, and you have your blog, so you have a digital footprint. And
right.
I always say, everybody always talks about, we're leaving a terrible carbon footprint. Okay, that's great and all, and terrible, obviously. That's great that you're putting awareness. It's terrible we're doing it, but what are we doing in a positive light? We have all this social media and webs to put anything out there. Are we putting good content out there? And that's the big question. Is it? And you're leaving something behind that generations to come can enjoy. So that's.
Well, thank you.
Well, no.
What more can you ask? That's pretty awesome in my book. The fact that, like I said, the fact that people love it and use it and share it, and my name's attached to it is awesome. And when my little granddaughter gets big and she sees it and she says, "Hey, that's my grandmother."
And what's even more fun is that at some point when she has to do a book report, that your books are going to be probably on that list that she'll use.
Well, I hope so. I sure hope so. That would make me so happy.
Well, when you think about it, not only will your own granddaughter do it, but kids all around will probably do it as well. I mean, that is a legacy that is just an awesome legacy to have, to know that, kid is going to read my book, have to do some kind of report. Now they're all digital. It's on an iPad, at least it is here. And so it's a little bit more bizarre, even to me. Like, my daughter looks at me and goes, "So, how did you guys do your book reports? Was it on an iPad?" I'm like, "No, dear, we actually read the book and then had to write, multi-page."
That's right.
She's like,
"You had to actually write on paper."
Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny. Like summer before last, I think there was a lady wrote me and said that my book was on their summer reading list. So all the kids in this one little community had to read my book for the summer. So that was exciting. Like, yeah, that's fun.
And you're kind of creating and planting a seed for the imagination for those kids, and then more kids. So you're definitely building this garden of imagination in so many people's minds, and that's kind of in a sense why I was like, "Oh wow, we need to sit down and talk," because I was like, "This is brilliant. This is awesome. I love this. This is what
thank you.
I love these conversations." You even asked me, you go, "So is it normally just nutrition you talk about?" No. This is actually what it really starts with. This is the conversation I really want to have. It's not always the easiest ones to find, and it's really just the luck of the draw, being able to just have a little conversation on Facebook that was like, "Oh boy, here we go. This is going to continue."
That was fun.
Well, I really thank you for actually reaching out and saying what you did, because, again, that little just comment just sparked this entire episode, which is very important to me.
Well, me too. It's been great fun. I was excited to hear from you.
I sat down and was just enjoying doing my research, and to know that you got book 3 in the process. You have really 4 more that will be down the way. It gives a lot of people that, in a sense, kind of hope. It's like, oh wow, I actually get to see my weird family members come back multiple times, instead of that, well, I'm gonna, and I reference, your big books with the big names that, of course, like your Harry Potters and stuff like that in your game.
Right.
And I put every author in the same category, because you all have an audience that is in love with your characters, and your characters are family members to these people, and they want to know. So I always hate to hear, oh, well, you know what, that was my 2 books, and I'm done. That was my big concern, by the way. I was like, oh, I hope she's not done.
No, I have others, and it's fun for me because other than my Basset Hound and my Westie, which I've mentioned again, the other dogs and cats have all passed. You know, they're no longer with me. So when I write, I get to play with them again. Mm-hmm. You know, I get to talk to them again. They get to talk to me again. So it's like bringing them back to life for me as well as, you know, my readers who've always been alive. So it's a great way to honor them and the joy that they brought me while they were part of my family, and they'll live on forever now.
Well, that's just it.
An awesome thing to be able to do.
Right, and, you know, I love that. I love the fact that, you know, for one, you took something that was near and dear to you, you were able to share that in a unique way, and then kind of craft them into this humanized character, but still left them as the cat and the dogs that you've always loved. So it was a really cool creation. I loved it. It was like
good. It's fun.
So besides, you know, your 4 other books, is there anything else that we get to look forward to?
Well, just my I'm hoping to write some children's books for, you know, beginning readers, you know, so that I can get them to love reading right from the start. As I have so many people that tell me, you know, I don't really read, or I've never been much of a reader, and they miss so much out of life when you need an escape, and this is a way to have an escape without, you know, drugs or alcohol.
Exactly.
You know, you can go to New Orleans and ride around with my dogs and cats and have fun.
And see, to me, it's good, clean fun, which a lot of parents, I mean, yes, I grew up in a video game era where movies were what they called violent. Video games were quote-unquote violent. I turned out okay. I never liked them to put that stereotype, but yes, I get it. You know, I'm very protective of my daughter. She doesn't get to watch violent things, and video games, yes, I let her play, but they're Disney. So at the moment, I will allow it, and she loves to read, which really is my big thing. Like I challenge her to read, and we have a lot of fun with that. Mm-hmm. And you know, that it's that bond with a book that I don't think that we really see too much anymore. And that's why it's great to be able to talk to you and see that it's still out there. And I really hope you do go for that almost the pre-K and the kindergarten kind of demographic and start to work that degree, because those kids, they're always, you know, reading to those kids. And
well, that's the age when kids have imaginary friends, and their imagination is so wonderful. You know, the real world hadn't squashed their dreams and made them realize that, you know, not everything in life is wonderful. But if you get them at that age, they know that imagination is a good thing to have. You know, daydreaming is a good thing to do. It's, you know, stuff that you're taught not to do. When you can't be daydreaming all the time. I mean, yes, you can daydream a lot of the time. It's fun.
Well,
it's a great coping mechanism.
36 years old, I'm still daydreaming. I'm still using my imagination. So, you know,
well, there you go.
I'm hoping to pass that on to people too. It's like, yeah, we live in a very rough world. I mean, doesn't matter what country you're living in, it's rough everywhere. You gotta have talent. Books are great, you know, and what's great, again, going all the way back, it's great to have it digital, because you're able to just have it on your phone, have it on your tablet, and you take it on a train, you take it on a bus, you take it wherever you're at. You read it on a lunch break. That's what makes it nice.
It makes it really easy to enjoy yourself and to get away and take a little trip with your imagination.
Well, I look forward to all that you're going to be coming out with, and we'll definitely talk again, because I want to know what's coming up after this. I want to stay, right on top of it, because it really was interesting to actually, learn the genesis behind it all, and to kind of, in a sense, meet your characters and who they are from your perspective. Because again, on paper, it's kind of like that family member we don't get to see too often. But once you actually meet it from your place, then we really understand them. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Chris. I appreciate you calling and inviting me onto your podcast. I'm excited.
MK Clinton, everybody. What an amazing lady she is. I love the fact that she has such a cool blog, which, I say it all the time. I'm not one to be able to sit down and write every day. That's probably why I don't update our Facebook page on a daily basis, because I'm so busy and I don't have a lot to generate out of my brain. So I'm thinking to myself, what could I say that you guys don't already know? I feel like I'd be repeating myself, and yet she's able to post all the time, and I just think that's so cool. Again, you can always check out her blog, Barking from the Bayou. I can't tell you enough. Please, guys, go over there, check out her stuff. It's so much fun. Ever since we've been talking, I look every day to see what's new, and I want to read up on everything, because it's just a lot of fun. Something we actually talked about afterwards, after I turned off the mic, we were talking about audio, if she's ever thinking about doing an audio book. And it is something that she is considering. And I'm one of those people, I listen to podcasts, not my own, but I do listen to a lot of podcasts out there, and I love audiobooks. And, I would just love to hear, especially if she was to actually do it. And I know I didn't mention this to you, but I would love to hear her do it. And if she was to do it in voices, because, again, I understand what she said about hearing the actual dogs and cats talking. I can understand that imagination very well. And being able to bring out those voices and articulate that in audiobook would just be a lot of fun. Now, with that said, I can't stress enough to go out. Amazon has her books. The Kindle has her books. Just pick up a device. It's probably right next to you. You're probably listening to this podcast on one of the devices anyway. Her books are just amazing. And I just really want to hear her come out with another one and keep coming out with them. I mean, she said it. She wants 7 books. So that means probably no more podcasting for her and more writing books. But I look forward to the continuation, and I love the actual the scenario and the landscape, and I like all of what she's doing. I just think it's so much fun. Well, that's this week's episode of The Groomer Next Door. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Until next week, have a pet-tastic week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, gotta go in my bedtime.